indivíduo ousado, uma situação crucial e uma tecnologia inovadora. É o destino fundindo homem, momento e máquina.
Hi, I'm Hunter Ellis. When Al Capone unleashes this brutal attack against his rivals, it's the climax of his career, sealing his rise from street thug to the most prominent gangster in Prohibition Chicago. Capone's gunmen use a weapon that has unprecedented firepower and becomes a symbol of gangster bloodshed, the Thompson submachine gun. In a single moment, Capone and the Tommy gun will transform gangland tensions into full-on street warfare.
Na manhã de 14 de fevereiro de 1929, a polícia de Chicago fez uma batida em um depósito ilegal de bebidas, no norte da cidade. Na realidade, os policiais eram impostores e haviam sido enviados por um dos homens mais importantes da cidade para executar uma vingança.
All right, you guys, bring us to the wall.
Al Capone's name was emblazoned in history by the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. If it had never occurred, he would have been known as just another thug in Chicago.
Which one of you bums is Moran?
Al Capone e seus rivais, ironicamente, extraíam grande poder de leis que deveriam melhorar a sociedade. 17 de janeiro de 1920, à 00:01, a lei seca começava. Demorou apenas 58 minutos para a primeira violação ocorrer, quando uma carga de uísque foi roubada em Chicago. Havia grandes lucros à espera da venda ilegal de álcool e os gangsters não perderam tempo.
Prohibition turned out to be a golden opportunity for criminals because it suddenly handed them a business which before then had been completely legitimate. So it suddenly put them in the mainstream.
Da noite para o dia, Chicago se tornou o centro do contrabando de bebidas.
The city had already put their stamp of approval on not funding anything in relation to the Prohibition Act. They would not enforce it at all. So that meant it gave the gangsters a free hand to do whatever they wanted in the city.
A polícia era subornada para fazer vista grossa. A corrupção corria solta na cidade.
It was well known that a lot of the police officers were riding shotgun with liquor shipments coming in and out of Chicago.
Well, Chicago was a very lawless land, even before Prohibition. I mean, lots of corruption with police and officials, so you could pretty much do what you want, get what you want in Chicago.
Havia dois grupos principais que contrabandeavam bebidas em Chicago. O norte era controlado por Dean O'Banion, um irlandês de 28 anos. O sul era o reduto do chefão gangster Johnny Torrio.
Most of the gangsters could rarely look beyond the next day or the next week, largely because the average age of the Chicago gangster when he died was 26 years old. Torrio was in his 40s when Prohibition began, comparatively old for a Chicago gangster. So he had more foresight than any of them did at the time.
Al Capone, de 21 anos, era o segundo homem de Torrio.
Capone was a very tough guy, large size for that era, especially about 5'11", and probably even as a young man, close to 200 pounds or a little bit more, and would have been very, very good with his fists.
As gangues menores atuavam no oeste e em outros bairros, mas Johnny Torrio impunha paz e cooperação entre os gangsters.
No, we're going to keep our noses.
Johnny Torrio saw that the only way for Prohibition to be of maximum profit to all the parties concerned was to unite. United, you profited. Divided, nobody won.
So tell me again what you were telling me.
Mas todos estavam tensos e apreensivos, especialmente no norte. Dean O'Banion estava irritado com Torrio, pois rivais continuavam a atentar contra seu grupo.
That's it.
You know, Banyan, like a lot of the gang leaders in Chicago, was a fairly volatile individual. The sort of guy where there was no backing up. If you stepped on his toe, he would punch you in the face. If you punched him in the face, he would shoot you.
19 de maio de 1924, O'Banion decidiu dar uma lição a Torrio, oferecendo-lhe participação em uma cervejaria lucrativa e armando para que a polícia fizesse uma batida no local. Nessa batida, a polícia encontrou mais de 100 mil galões de cerveja. Como era réu primário, O'Banion não foi preso, tal como previra. Torrio, porém, já havia violado a lei seca e então iria para a cadeia. Não demorou muito para Torrio perceber que havia sido traído por O'Banion.
Once O'Banion sets Torrio up for this arrest and conviction, there's no going back at that point. I think Torrio recognizes that, look, you just cannot deal with a guy like this. John Torrio was no angel. He was very sort of diplomatic and forward-looking, but there just comes a point when you can't deal with people anymore.
Torrio decidiu eliminar o líder do Norte. Para tanto, recorreu a seu soldado de confiança, Al Capone. Era fácil encontrar O'Banion que possuía uma floricultura.
Capone placed an order for an $8,000 rose sculpture to be picked up at the flower shop the next day, thus ensuring that O'Banion would likely be on the premises, finishing up the order and having it ready for when it was picked up.
(10 de novembro de 1924, os homens de Capone deram 6 tiros em Dean O'Banion. O assassinato da floricultura abalou o núcleo de O'Banion, especialmente seus capangas de maior confiança, Haim Wise e George Bugs Moran. Haim Wise, aos 26 anos, tornou-se o novo líder do Norte.
He's got plenty of enemies, but so do I. I gotta watch my back too.
Jaime Weiss was a hot-tempered Pole. He was the only North-Sider that Al Capone truly feared because he was very unpredictable. He'd fly off at the handle at any slightest provocation.
Bugs Moran, de 23 anos, era o segundo homem no comando.
Bugs Moran, who was an ally of Dean O'Banion, was more like a thug. He was a very handsome, devilish thug, but he was more of a gunman who was carrying out orders, and he had no head for strategy particularly.
Wise e Moran juraram vingar a morte de seu chefe.
When O'Banion was murdered, Weiss and Moran not only lost a leader, they also lost a best friend. They viewed it as a personal loss, and therefore their reaction was not only violent, not only bloody, but extremely vindictive and relentless.
The O'Banion killing marks a bloody war of retaliation between the North and South Side gangs that will last for the next 6 years. For Weiss and Moran, killing Johnny Torrio and Al Capone becomes their primary mission, and they won't delegate that task to any underling. They'll see to it personally.
24 de janeiro de 1925. Johnny Torrio voltava para casa depois de uma tarde de compras com a mulher e não fazia ideia de que Wise e Moran esperavam por ele. Torrio não tinha como se defender do ataque de Moran. Só um milagre poderia salvá-lo. (24 de janeiro de 1925. A guerra entre as gangues se intensificava pelas ruas de Chicago. O homem era Al Capone. O momento, o massacre do Dia dos Namorados. A máquina, a submetralhadora Thompson. Johnny Torrio, o líder gangster mais poderoso de Chicago, sofria o ataque de seu rival do norte, Bugs Moran.
Bugs Moran is reputed to have stood over him with a pistol to his head and ready to put the last round to him, and click, he was out of bullets.
Moran e Wise deixaram Torrio agonizando, atingido por 5 tiros.
Torrio knew, after he survived that attack on him, that he had no stomach for the violence that was coming. He knew what was happening. He knew that it was time to step aside and hand the leadership over to Al Capone, who did have the stomach, who did have the ruthlessness to fight the Northsiders on their own terms.
I'm quitting this. I'm giving you the business. I'm done. Good luck.
When Torrio retires, 26-year-old Al Capone is suddenly sitting on top of a multi-million-dollar conglomerate of breweries, speakeasies, brothels, and gambling joints. He'll have to fight to keep his empire from being torn apart by rival gangs. But he has the smarts and the skills to handle it. They were honed on the streets of New York.
Homem. Alphonse Capone nascera no Brooklyn em 17 de janeiro de 1899, filho de imigrantes italianos, sendo o quarto de 7 irmãos. A família vivia perto do Pátio da Marinha com um movimentado mercado de negócios ilegais.
That meant he grew up next to a lot of brothels that the sailors used. So that was his first exposure to vice. For Capone, it was probably second nature. It was just part of life. He really didn't think too much about it.
No início do século XX, o calmo Johnny Torrio estabeleceu um dos primeiros negócios organizados ilegais da região. Possuía bordéis e cassinos e Capone mantinha as coisas em ordem para ele.
Those kids didn't realize that they were actually being introduced to a life of crime and to behavior that could only get them in trouble as they got older.
O jovem Capone parecia destinado à confusão. Abandonou a escola aos 14 anos, passou a rondar as ruas com gangues de moleques e fazia bicos para ajudar a família.
He's a pin setter at a bowling alley. He works at a book bindery. He also works at a paper box factory. But he finds that the lure of making fast money in crime is a better way to go.
Aos 18 anos, Capone arrumou emprego em um bar de Coney Island, administrado por um gangster.
Capone is very brash. He doesn't care about anybody. He makes his own rules and makes his own way and says what he feels when he feels like it.
Um dia, Capone fez um comentário atrevido para uma frequentadora, Lena Galluccio, que lá estava com o irmão Frank.
Hey, honey. Nice caboose.
Frank Galluccio loses it, demands that Al Capone apologizes to his sister.
It was a compliment. You're coming!
Esse ferimento daria origem ao apelido de Capone, Scarface.
He was always very sensitive about it and tried to cover it over with powder to make it almost invisible. Nevertheless, it seemed to have almost a mythical effect.
Logo depois, os mafiosos mais velhos exigiram uma trégua.
I want us to shake hands. We could do well to put this all behind us.
Anos depois, Capone contrataria Galluccio como guarda-costas em uma viagem a Nova York. A 4 de dezembro de 1918, a namorada irlandesa de Capone, May Conklin, deu à luz um menino batizado Albert Francis Sonny Capone. Dias depois, Capone, de 19 anos, casou-se com May.
She might have been somewhat of a fast girl in some sense because she certainly would have known who this guy was, that he was no Rhodes Scholar, and that he wasn't on a track to a life of legitimate, honest, hard work.
Shut up, you wop.
Em 1919, um ano depois do casamento, Capone se meteu em séria confusão durante uma briga. Socou tanto um homem que acabou matando-o. Ele precisava sair de Nova York e recorreu à ajuda de Johnny Torrio. A essa altura, Torrio já havia transferido seu negócio para Chicago, onde arrumou emprego para Capone em um bordel.
Al Capone started as a doorman / roper / pimp / bouncer, everything rolled into one.
Territory's going.
Thoriel estava interessado em Capone pois percebia sua capacidade de organização e sua crueldade, algo que o próprio Thoriel não possuía.
Thoriel had no stomach for violence. He needed somebody at his side who was capable of carrying out the dirty work that he didn't want to personally see to himself.
Em 1924, Capone era o segundo no comando da gangue de Thoriel. Juntos, eles expandiram as operações até o subúrbio de Cícero.
When John Thoriel retires the next year and leaves his protege in charge, Capone becomes one of the most powerful gangsters in Chicago. But a new force is about to emerge on the scene. A weapon that will elevate the gang wars to unprecedented heights of violence.
Em setembro de 1925, policiais se dirigiram ao que parecia ter sido mera troca de tiros. Mas chegando ao local, ficaram espantados com a quantidade de munição usada no curto tiroteio, 50 cartuchos de bala 45.
They thought that it was caused by a squad of riflemen. Well, they had no idea that such a weapon existed that could create that much damage.
Os ataques se sucediam e a metralhadora Tommy aparecia nas manchetes. Al Capone estava encantado.
Hey, it's loaded. I know. Get out of here. Take these to the boys.
All right. Here was a weapon that was incredibly portable, delivering a large volume of fire at a target. And he realized very quickly that if he didn't have similar arms to protect his interests, he'd be quickly exterminated.
Logo, a Tommy tornou-se a arma preferida dos gangsters. Era fácil de comprar e não havia leis regulando seu uso.
It was illegal to carry a revolver in your pocket in Chicago, but it was perfectly legal to walk down the street with a Thompson submachine gun in your arms. It wasn't against the law.
Depois que a Tommy foi introduzida em 1925, a matança das gangues em Chicago chegou ao ápice, com mais de um assassinato por semana. Esse índice até hoje não foi suplantado por nenhuma gangue.
It ratchets up the violence. It has the effect of producing this wild, lawless environment where there are gratuitous episodes of extreme violence on a regular basis.
When the Tommy gun appears on the scene, gangsters throughout Chicago begin using it. The weapon becomes linked to Al Capone, though, more than any other gangster because of one murder in particular. When an important public figure is caught in his crosshairs, it elevates Capone's status from little-known mob boss to notorious killer.
27 de abril de 1926. Centro de Operações Capone no Hotel Hot Horn. Capone tinha problemas com uma gangue comandada por Klondike O'Donnell, que estava vendendo sua cerveja no território de Capone.
So anyway, boss, you're not going to believe this, but O'Donnell's just down the street.
Quando O'Donnell foi visto perto de sua sede, Capone decidiu dar uma volta com a Tommy.
Some witnesses said they saw Capone pull a Thompson submachine gun from the wall panel in the restaurant at the Hawthorne.
Membros da gangue de O'Donnell estavam bebendo com um amigo de infância.
Billy, how you doing?
I'm good, Jimmy. How are you?
It's good to see you. Hey.
Uma estrela em ascensão nos tribunais criminais.
Hey, keep out of trouble, huh?
Hey, to your help.
Good to you.
Ninguém imaginava que Capone estava prestes a atacá-los pessoalmente. Abril de 1926. Al Capone estava prestes a destruir um gangster rival que havia invadido sua área. Ele pensava que seu alvo, o contrabandista Klondike O'Donnell, estava bebendo em um bar próximo. Porém, era Miles, irmão de Klondike, com amigos.
That's going to be a good day with the ponies, you know.
One pistol shot is something that is survivable. You might be able to survive it depending on where it hits you. If you wanted a weapon that would guarantee that you were going to kill the person you wanted to kill, the Thompson was the weapon for you.
Miles se protegeu e não foi atingido, mas 3 colegas foram mortalmente feridos, incluindo William McSwiggan, procurador do estado.
Up until this point, the public has turned a blind eye to gangster killings. But now that a civilian has been murdered, and a high-profile prosecutor at that, it looks like Capone has gone too far.
You've got 3 men killed at once with a Thompson submachine gun now, and you've got a assistant state's attorney killed. And that immediately causes outrage because the immediate suspicion is, was he the intended target?
O chefe de McSwiggan, procurador do estado, acusou Capone de ter atirado pessoalmente. Al precisou se esconder.
The McSwiggan killing was the first time that most people in Chicago took notice at the gangland killings, and initially had an outcry of wanting to have these killings stopped.
Não havia provas concretas contra Capone, nem testemunhas que quisessem depor. O caso foi arquivado, mas o incidente cristalizou a crença de que Capone e sua Tommy eram uma ameaça pública. Máquina. Em 1926, a metralhadora Thompson era uma das armas mais poderosas que já haviam chegado às ruas. Recebeu esse nome do general John Thompson, que a inventou em 1918.
John Thompson very astutely recognized that American soldiers needed greater firepower. He recognized this even before World War I, but then once World War I started, he realized that now is the time that we're going to have to develop a weapon that fits these terms.
This is the fully automatic water-cooled Browning M1917 heavy machine gun, standard U.S. Army issue in World War I. It's heavy. It weighs about 93 pounds with tripod and gear, so it takes a crew of 3 to transport and operate it. It's almost impossible for an infantryman with a rifle to advance against a defensive weapon like this. But Thompson wants to change things. He wants to put this kind of full auto firepower into the hands of the individual soldier as an offensive weapon.
Para desânimo de Thompson, o exército não queria investir em novas armas. Então, logo no início da Primeira Grande Guerra, ele deixou a vida militar para projetar a poderosa arma que imaginara. E escreveu: "Os rapazes da infantaria precisam de uma potente arma individual que arrase as trincheiras." Em 1916, ele fundou uma empresa própria e criou uma metralhadora leve, rápida e automática. Decidiu usar na nova arma o cartucho padrão do Exército, o de calibre 45 da pistola Colt. O maior desafio seria desenvolver um mecanismo confiável de travamento da culatra. Essa trava mantém o tambor fechado quando a arma é acionada. Sem trava, o cartucho seria ejetado muito cedo e explodiria. Nenhum sistema de trava era leve ou pequeno o suficiente para a arma que Thompson imaginara.
He needed something new that could keep the weapon locked during firing, that could unlock the weapon during the recoil phase, and still keep the weapon lightweight.
Thompson achou o que queria em uma alça de bronze chamada trava Blish. Funcionava por adesão metálica ou fricção, que atrasava o impulso na retaguarda do ferrolho e a ejeção do cartucho, até que a pressão do tambor estivesse em nível seguro. Foi o suficiente para proteger o atirador dos cartuchos ejetados.
The Blish lock was a major step in safety for the guns.
Thompson chamou a arma de submetralhadora porque a munição tinha o mesmo calibre das pistolas. Era uma nova classificação.
The Thompson was a completely new design, started from scratch, to become, in essence, a standalone generation of firearm.
O primeiro modelo foi lançado em 1920. Media 81 centímetros, era feito de aço carbono e o cabo talhado em nogueira negra americana. Carregado, pesava 9 quilos. Utilizava cartuchos 45 de pistola Colt automática e 3 tambores diferentes podiam conter 20, 50 ou 100 balas por vez.
It's a revolutionary weapon insofar as it produces an incredible volume of fire. One person can stand and spray an area with 145 caliber bullets in the span of just 4 seconds. And there really aren't any other weapons in the world at all that can compare to that kind of functionality.
Mas a arma chegara tarde demais para a Primeira Guerra Mundial.
It was designed to fill a military role, and then the military didn't need it.
Então, Thompson decidiu ir atrás de clientes civis. Em 1922, ele fez uma demonstração pública em Nova Jersey, mas não achou mercado para a arma.
There's this strange reception. Everyone that saw the weapon demonstrated would remark it's an incredible technical innovation. It's the greatest firepower that there is available to an individual today. But then nobody was buying it.
Quem salvou a Tommy da obscuridade foram os mafiosos da Lei Seca de Chicago.
The era of the drive-by shooting was born thanks to the Thompson submachine gun.
So what do you have here, Marty?
All right, Hunter, here is your M1921 Thompson submachine gun.
Very nice. Now, not too heavy. It's about like 9 pounds, 10 pounds, something like that?
You're approaching 10 pounds of the weapon. It's not exactly lightweight, but not too terrible until I give you a 100-round C-drum magazine, right, with the submachine gun and 100 rounds of 45 ACP in a C-drum magazine. You're looking at approaching 20 pounds of weight.
But it's nice and compact, so I can see why gangsters would want to choose this as the ultimate weapon. It seems like it'd be easy to wield inside of a vehicle.
Absolutely. Gangsters love this. This was the ideal drive-by shooting weapon because, especially equipped with a 100-round magazine, the weapon can pour out a very high volume of fire. And because it's somewhat of a heavy weapon, it tends to hold its recoil down. There's very little in the way of felt recoil on the weapon, and so that gives you the ability to keep your point of aim on a target while you just pour out volume of fire on it.
Vou simular um tiroteio de passagem. A 25 km por hora, tenho 4 segundos para atirar, o tempo para esvaziar um tambor de 100 balas. Quero ver o que sou capaz de fazer nessas latas.
Now that I'm in here, it's a little more difficult than I thought it would be.
Yeah, it's tight. It's not an easy thing. Drive-by shooting is a very challenging thing to accomplish well. Ready? Fire! Hold your fire. Click it on safety. All right, let's see how you did. That was 4 seconds.
I'll tell you, that is challenging.
How'd it feel?
It felt good, though. And it's easy with this much firepower to really walk it onto the target and just collectively put a lot of ammunition in one space. Well, this is a pretty graphic representation of what you can do with that much firepower. So how'd I do?
You did good. I mean, look, this is 4 seconds of time on target with an M1921 Thompson submachine gun, and I think it's safe to say that you neutralized the target and that you are an effective drive-by shooting gangster now.
O tiroteio de passagem tornou-se alvo da recriminação aos gangsters. Seu poder letal fez de Al Capone o maior chefe do crime de Chicago. Em 1926, ele controlava a maior parte do negócio no sul e oeste da cidade e também no subúrbio de Cícero. Mas a guerra piorou quando Jaime Wise, arqui-inimigo de Capone, executou um audacioso golpe.
Jaime Wise was referred to as the only gangster Al Capone ever really feared. Capone was heard to say once that if he had known what he was getting into when he left New York, he'd have never set foot in Chicago.
20 de setembro de 1926. Capone estava jantando em seu centro de operações no Hotel Hawthorne quando ouviu tiros de Tommy na rua. No momento em que pensou que o ataque havia terminado, foi até a janela para ver o que estava acontecendo. Exatamente o que Wise esperava. (20 de setembro de 1926). Al Capone ouviu tiros de Tommy enquanto jantava no Hotel Hawthorne.